Welcome to Old School Sports and our inaugural episode of a new series here on our channel. Franchise Hockey Manager 9, which was just released earlier this week, has a new NCAA Division 1 college feature, and we are going to try to build a college program. And I think we're taking on quite an interesting challenge here. Fill you in on that shortly. In the meantime, any new watchers to the channel, thanks so much for joining us. Would love it if you like our videos, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, particularly with hockey. Feel like I know baseball pretty well, and I've done a lot of OOTP series. I am not by any stretch of the imagination as much of a hockey aficionado as I am of baseball and some other sports. So always appreciate thoughts from listeners on what I've missed, what I could do differently, what I could do better. And I think we are going to have an interesting challenge here. If you're looking closely, I am sure you can see that we are going to be playing as the Holy Cross Crusaders, a Division I college program. I have done a little research, and I don't mean to offend anyone with anything that I say right now, but it does seem like Atlantic Hockey, the conference that Holy Cross and all of our new opponents that you can see here, it seems that this conference is probably, I think, the weakest of the six major conferences in Division I hockey, behind the Big Ten, ECAC, Hockey East, CCHA, and the NCHC. I looked at the top 20 teams in the nation right now in college hockey, and Atlantic Hockey was the only conference that it didn't have anyone in the top 20. Looked like RIT was the closest right now. They were just out of the top 20 polling. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting challenge. A couple of other reasons why it's an interesting challenge. It's not just one of the weaker conferences. We also, if I can click to the right things here, also have one of the weaker teams, I believe. And again, correct me if I am wrong with any of these thoughts that I have. But our goal from our ownership, which I guess is technically probably our athletic director, is just to not be last in what might be the weakest Division I hockey conference. So we're taking over a program that is not great in a conference that is not great. And the other things we've done to kind of pick a team that I think is going to be a real interesting challenge, you can see we don't have a big arena, can only hold 1,400 in terms of its capacity, so we're not going to be generating tons of revenue, even if we're selling out every game. And the other thing I did that was interesting is most teams in this game have a scholarship limit of 18. The Crusaders actually only have a scholarship limit of 14. So that's going to make it a little more challenging. We're not a prominent Division I college program, and we also don't have as many scholarships to give as many of the teams that we're going to be playing against. The excellent academic reputation will help us hopefully recruit some players, but the expensive tuition cost, especially given the lack of scholarships we have, is going to make it challenging too. For those who aren't familiar with the college game, and since it's only been out for a few days, that's probably many people, you can give half scholarships. And taking a look at Holy Cross's roster, you can see we've got, looks like 9 players on full scholarships and then 10 on partials. And then there's a bunch of players who are non-scholarship players on the team. And just by the broad star ratings here, you can see we do not have a ton of talent on this on this team. Not a lot of big time players in terms of their ability today. In terms of the potential down the line, our scouts do think that a few of our younger freshman and sophomore players could develop into interesting players over the next few years, which would clearly be helpful to our building of this program. But I think it's going to be a good challenge. I have played FHM for many years now and did a long playthrough last year in FHM 8 with the New York Islanders at the NHL level. Very well may end up doing another NHL playthrough sometime in the coming months, or maybe even when the calendar turns to 2023. But until then, we are going to kick things off learning more about the college capabilities of FHM 9 and to see if there is any chance that we can, one, keep our job with Holy Cross because we only have a 2-year contract. And then number two, turn this team from one of the weaker teams, I believe, in NCAA Division I ice hockey into a team that maybe down the line can get into an NCAA tournament and recruit some better prospects than we've recruited in recent years. So I think I've explained the challenge aspect of picking Holy Cross. There also is a little bit of a connection with my life. I actually almost attended Holy Cross many, many, many years ago. I was accepted there, and I seriously thought about attending, ended up going in a different direction. But part of the reason I was interested in Holy Cross as a child of the 1980s was that it was a good school that was driving distance from my family that I did get admitted to. And it also had, at the time, pretty interesting sports. And I think it still does today. Obviously, it's got a Division I ice hockey program. But back in the mid to late 80s, this is a history lesson for those of you who are much younger than me, and maybe some people my age. And there's probably people who are younger than me who do know this. But Holy Cross actually had a football player named Gordy Lockbaum, who finished in the top 5 of the voting for the Heisman Trophy 2 consecutive seasons. He was a two-way player. He was a wide receiver / running back offensively. He was a defensive back. Actually, he was a 3-way player because he was also a kick returner. And he had some incredible seasons for Holy Cross in the mid to late 80s. And I always thought it was kind of cool that this pretty small school that was not on the prominent national scene in most cases had a player who was kind of the same size as me. I was clearly not the athlete that Gordy Lockbaum was, who was actually finishing in the top 5 of the Heisman Trophy voting. I don't know if something like that could ever happen today in 2022, but back in the mid to late 80s, it did happen, and it was kind of cool. So that's what got me interested in Holy Cross. And as I said, I did apply there when I was looking at colleges, got in, went to Accepted Students Weekend, and my life ended up going in a different direction, but there is always a fondness in my heart for Holy Cross. So in addition to thinking that it's going to be a pretty challenging test for my FHM 9 skills and hopefully some good FHM 9 luck, there also is that small connection to the Crusaders personally for me. So we'll take a quick look at our roster. You can see goalies, we've got a few players who are better than 1-star ability and better than 1-star potential, which when we get into some other positions, you'll see actually is saying something. a senior, a sophomore, and a freshman. So probably wouldn't hurt if we could bring on a good big-time goalie in recruiting for next season, but certainly have guys who can play the position. Left defense, just 2 guys on the team, but both look like decent players at a high level as far as their ability and potential. Right defense, we've got a lot of people, but the only player who doesn't have half-star potential is the freshman Mac Oliphant, who is a 5-star potential player according to our scouts. Pretty solid defensively, decent physically, has some growth to do offensively, but also not bad in terms of leadership and team play. We do have him under a full scholarship, so hopefully he'll be an important player for us for the next 4 seasons. Only one left wing on the roster at all in Tyler Giradosi, and he doesn't look like all that much a player. And then we have a ton of centers and a ton of right wings. The centers look like we have a little bit of talent. The right wings are actually very similar to our right defense situation, actually probably worse. We only have one player, Matthew DeBoer, who is more than a half a star potential player according to our scouts, and he is on a partial scholarship. So we've got a lot of work to do to improve this team. The recruiting in FHM 9 is kind of a 2-pronged situation. In November, it's National Signing Day, when you sign the players who will join your team for the next season. And then after you sim forward another couple months to New Year's Day of the next year, that's when you start getting verbal commitments for players who will potentially be signing with your team 11 months later, I guess 10 plus months later, technically, in the next National Signing Day. So we already have a list of players that are unsigned. These are the players that back in January of this year, before we were simming through, the previous GM/coach of the Crusaders made initial outreach to, and our potential prospects who can grow our team. And when we look at this crew, there's a few players who have decent potential. There's 2 5-star potential players along with a 3.5-star and a 2-star potential player. So when you're looking at the roster that we have now, that's potentially adding some pretty serious talent. And then there are lower ranked players who we're also potentially going to bring on board. So it looks like we are set up to at least be in the discussion for some of these players to join us next season, which is positive. Clearly, if you look at our roster, left defense is a need since we only have one player. Right wing is a need since we have just a bunch of very mediocre replacement level players there. And then even right defense is a need since although we have a lot of players there, only one of them is anything more than potentially replacement level. But honestly, we just need talent at every position to compete at a higher level. And when we look at our potential graduates or hopeful graduates, we're going to be losing 6 people off the team this coming season, 4.5 total scholarships. So that will open up the ability where hopefully we can bring on some of those prospects we're looking at. Not losing any of our highest potential players, but in terms of current ability, a 1-star player is still pretty special for this Holy Cross roster. And 5 of our 1-star or better players are going to be gone after this year. So you can see where we're losing probably 40% of the players who are anything above just replacement level. So we've got a lot of holes to fill. Try to hopefully use those 4.5 scholarships to fill them. but not going to really do a deep dive on any of these players in this episode. Just kind of wanted to, at a high level, introduce you to what we were dealing with and what we had and more accurately didn't have at some of these positions. But the first thing I really want to focus on in this playthrough is our staff and our coaching. And we do have a little money to hopefully fix our coaching staff, because there's some big holes on our coaching staff. You look at our defensive coach is poor at pretty much everything. Our offensive coach is poor at pretty much everything. And some of those guys are making some serious money. So we are going to take the hit from moving on from them. It'll open up a little more money for us this year, but we will have to pay out a chunk of their contracts. So it's not the optimal thing to do, but I think we can find better coaches than Eric Sorensen and the rankings that they have on him. So we're going to go ahead and release him. It's going to cost us $51,000, but getting that contract off the books still does give us more money. Similarly, Bobby Butler is just not rated very highly. We're paying a ton of money to him. Let's just take the hit right now, release him. We've got to spend even more to get out of that contract. So we've got over $106,000 now in dead money, but getting those guys off the books has opened up some money for us to hopefully bring on some better talent to coach our team. Caston Summer is actually not a bad coach. There are areas where he can help us. Clearly, we need to focus on getting someone who's better at coaching goalies than him. But I think we'll keep him around. Tony Fitzstevens, our trainer, actually has very high trainer skill. Happy to have him around. And then we've got 2 scouts signed up. Jake Brewster, who is the definition of a average replacement level type scout, and Doyle Gilbert, who similarly has average scouting abilities. So we're going to need to bring a couple coaches onto the staff, and we're also going to need to bring in a few more scouts because right now, when you look at our scouting, we are basically no presence in many areas of the country, and we just have a very small presence in the upper and lower Midwest with those 2 scouts who are based in Michigan and Illinois. So we've got a lot of work to do to improve this coaching staff, but I would rather kind of take the hit right now and get a coaching staff that we can hopefully start developing the young players on our team more effectively with over the next several seasons. All right, we spent a good chunk of the money we have, but we brought on 3 pretty solid coaches to join us. Robin Farkas for $68,000 a year, Jim Graham for $57,000, and Sasha Gonzalo for $33,500. Gonzalo is kind of a goaltending expert, so we are going to assign him as our goalie coach. You can see he's very good with goalies, good with coaching prospects. So I think that he's a nice fit there. We have kept Caston Summer on board. With the fact he's making $120,000, he's definitely getting expensive. But we're going to keep him for the time being. Only 2 years left. Would rather not take the hit right now. I think right now he is the best offensive coach on our team. He's good or above average in all the key categories. Farkas is our kind of defensive coach that we brought on board. You can see he's good at everything when it comes to coaching defensive players and the defensive part of the game. And then Jim Graham is going to be our skill coach. You can see Summer was solid there, above average in both physical training and working with prospects. But Graham is a notch better. He's good at both of those aspects. So this at least gives us a coaching staff that, while not exceptional, is at least above average to good to, in a couple cases, or I guess in one case, very good at their job. We've got a trainer who's great. I think this made a lot of sense. There's still potential with the amount of money that Caston Summers making that maybe we move on from him at some point. But we've still got about $330,000 to potentially spend on scouts right now. And that's going to be a critical area for us to invest in. And I think that I'm going to invest most heavily in the New England, in the or the Atlantic and the New England regions, as they're called in this game. New England obviously is New England, but Atlantic could be a lot of different definitions. Some people might call this Northeast or the New York metro area, but it's Atlantic for purposes of this game. Those are the two areas that are closest to Holy Cross here in the Worcester, Massachusetts area. And that, I think, is the area where, at least particularly in these first couple years of the playthrough, we're going to be most likely to attract players who will come to our school. I think it's going to be pretty unlikely that we're going to be attracting players from the Midwest who could be going to some of the Big Ten schools or the other big college conferences. And obviously, even in the areas that we're going to hopefully have a better scouting presence, we're still going to be recruiting against not just all the schools in our conference, but also all the ECAC and Hockey East schools, most of whom probably are more prominent in the world of hockey than Holy Cross is. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I do think that we at least have some money to hopefully find some good scouts to join Misters Brewster and Gilbert. And we have added a bunch of scouts to our staff. You can see we've spent just about every penny we have, but we do have a scouting team of 11 scouts now, and that gives us much better coverage than we used to have. We're pretty balanced across the country. We actually wanted to be better in the Atlantic and New England regions. And you can see we did. I don't know how well you can see it, but in the Atlantic region, we added our head scout who's from New York, who's the best scout we have. We've also got a solid scout in New Jersey. And then in the New England region, brought on a scout in Maine, Connecticut, and the second one in Maine, who are pretty solid. You can see we've still got Brewster and Gilbert on board, who are now the least impressive of the scouts on our staff, but going to keep those two on board. They certainly help in the Midwest. But hopefully the addition of these scouts is going to give us an opportunity to do a little better in recruiting and find some hidden gems that may be unhidden today, as well as also just having a better idea of who's actually good, who's actually not, and have a strong view on who's got the potential to maybe develop into something that other teams haven't identified yet. So obviously the success of our players and the quality of our players will ultimately determine how successful we are on the ice. But I think we've done a pretty good job, given the budget that we were dealing with here in Holy Cross, of at least building a coaching staff that when we bring players on board should do a decent job of developing them, and then also building a scouting department that hopefully is going to help us identify more and better players than we could have before. Certainly have a lot more scouts, and the quality of our scouts, while not incredible, is better than it was. We've got pretty good coverage across the country at this point. Was hoping to add a scout to help in Canada, and you can see we're very weak in Canada right now. Presume that most, actually, it's not. I guess the top Canadian prospects are going to be in the juniors, but there's probably good players in Canada who go to college in the United States that we are not going to have as good recruiting for this coming season. Hopefully, we'll be able to open up some more money in our budget going forward and add some scouting, particularly in Quebec and Ontario, the areas that are closer to Holy Cross, maybe in Atlantic Canada too, down the line. But certainly we are probably fairly viewed as more of a regional recruiting base right now. So I would think that between New England, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, maybe touching a little bit into Ohio, Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, to the extent that there's any hockey prospects in Delaware. I'm sure there are. No insults to those of you who are connected to the world of hockey in Delaware. But I think we're positioned well for where we're likely to realistically be recruiting this coming season and probably even the next couple seasons. If we get to a point where we're a lot more successful on the ice, bringing in big-time prospects, and we're starting to really have a national recruiting base, then that means things are going well. So I got no complaints if that happens, but I'm not expecting it to happen overnight. So now turning back to those players, the ones who are actually going to be winning or losing for us on the ice and doing all the heavy lifting, I want to just take a look at team harmony. And we've got one outspoken player, one unpopular player. Joe Solomine, center, is a pretty mediocre player. Wonder if he's on scholarship or not. He's on a partial scholarship, too. He's unpopular. He's not all that great. We've got a lot of centers. Sorry, Joe. I think we're going to move on from you. So we're going to release Joe Solomine, trying to just ensure that the people on the team get along as well as they possibly can. Charlie Spence is outspoken. He's a right defenseman. He's really good mentally, actually. His physical skills are just not all that impressive, but we're a pretty low-level Division I team. We've got players on this team that probably aren't all that impressive. He's not on a scholarship. He does have the capability to kind of play left defense, and given the way that our roster looks, with only two left defensemen, he's a replacement level player, though. He's a junior. How do some of these other replacement level guys look? Higgins is a little better physically. He's not as good mentally, but he's, got some areas where he's got the traits of a better hockey player. Robliati, again, not as good mentally, but kind of stronger and physically in some of the hockey skills. Shatsky, he's a little more similar, pretty good mentally, and he's got aspects where he looks like he's a decent player. But honestly, Spence, in terms of his physical ratings and then just his defensive and offensive skills, looks like he's probably the weakest of the guys among those right defensemen. And he's also outspoken. He's a 20-year-old freshman. I think we're just going to move on from Mr. Spence as well. And now I think as we sim forward, we'll get some other walk-ons, see what they look like. But at least at this point, there's no potential issues with team harmony. That'll change over time. Given that we're not the most talented team on the ice, I think it's important that at least we've got a cohesive locker room that's working together. We also don't really have a leader on the team, which isn't great. Take a look at our captains. Jack Ricketts, who's a junior, 1.5-star player, which for us is a solid player. Decent personality, average physically, kind of average offensively, average defensively. Don't see any need to kind of take the A away from him. Peterson, senior, so he'll be leaving after this season. Again, another solid player in the context of our team. A little better in terms of team player, leadership, temperament, so he can definitely keep an assistant letter. I don't know about Grayson Constable as our actual captain, though. Not perfect in terms of some of his mental ratings for being a good leader on the team, and not really all that big time a player. He's not even on a scholarship. And it looks like he's a senior with 1 year left. He's not going to be happy if we take the C away from him, but he just doesn't really have the personality of a captain, and he's not as skilled as some people. I may look to see if there's some other potential captains among some of our higher quality players. Yeah, like look right here, Nick Hale. He's a better team player, better with leadership, better with temperament and professionalism, and he's also a better player on the ice. He's also a senior. He's on a full scholarship. It's not going to make Mr. Constable happy if we rip the C off his chest, but I think that Hale is a better captain, so we are going to just go ahead and appoint him captain, keep the same 2 assistants. Probably not going to be a good thing here for our team harmony. Yeah, Grayson is unhappy. If Grayson remains unhappy for too long, he may just be a player that we decide to move on from. I don't think we need to make that decision right now. We've certainly given him reason to be unhappy by stripping the captaincy away from him. And you can see with the half scholarship from the player that we also cut off the team, that does now have us in a situation where when we're looking at our graduating players, that other half scholarship that we've stripped away now means we've got 5 full scholarships to potentially give out to prospects. So when you look at the unsigned players who are probably going to be our focus in less than 2 months when we get to National Signing Day, certainly would think that we'd potentially be offering full scholarships to any of these top 4 guys who have more than minimal potential if we can bring them on board. Do we maybe offer a partial scholarship to some of these other players if they play a position that fits a need for us? Certainly something to think about. And then there's also the other option for us to try to swoop in on a player that we didn't get a verbal commitment from last year, and see if we can maybe throw a scholarship at a really highly ranked player who, in the case of Holy Cross maybe is really into his academics and is perhaps local to Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, New York, probably our key feeding areas. Maybe leverage the excellent academic reputation we have and see if we can potentially bring a player on board who isn't really on our radar right now. I would think it's going to be a pretty low probability that we're going to be able to do that, but I don't really know the answer because I've never actually played this game before. So I'd like to find out. Given that we don't have a ton of talent on the team right now, I am just going to let the AI set up the organization as far as who's dressed, and even let them set up the lines initially. Oh, it looks like they did because I clicked on the AI to set up everything. See what our lineups look like. Obviously, we're low on left wings and left defenders, as we talked about. That's not something that we can fix right now because we're not going to be recruiting players until November, and then those players won't be joining us until next July when the new season starts. So hopefully we'll get some walk-ons who may fill some of those positions from the couple guys that we cut. But it's not going to be a real intensive season for us in terms of managing the lines and the lineups and the roster. We're kind of stuck with what we have, and we'll see if we can make what we have a little better through recruiting. So we're going to go ahead and play through the preseason, or play up to the preseason start actually, and then play through the preseason, hopefully not have too many injuries. Maybe we'll pick up another couple walk-ons. We'll go through the budgeting process for the first time and take a look at that, and then we'll call it an episode and come back at the start of the 2022-2023 season in our next episode. And we've sold just 679 season tickets in our 1,400 person arena. You can see that is one of the weakest numbers in all of college hockey. A little better than Lindenwood, LIU, Niagara, Sacred Heart. But not too many teams that that sold fewer season tickets than Holy Cross did for the upcoming season. Hopefully, we will be playing better on the ice going forward. Just taking a look, we have played one game so far, and we did, perhaps not surprisingly, get beat. Wisconsin beat us 3-0. A little surprised it was that close. You can see we've got Clarkson, Air Force. Is this North Dakota or Notre Dame? I think it's North. It is Notre Dame. Yeah, I know some of you are going to be yelling at me that I haven't downloaded any of the packets with better icons for the teams. Just kind of forgot about it and kind of stuck with what I've got at this point. And similar to when you're playing a NHL franchise in FHM, you will get recruiting updates. You can see the best recruits available to us are all 5-star potential players. Not sure how many of them we're actually going to be able to recruit and get to join us here at Holy Cross. But when we do get to National Signing Day, hopefully we'll be able to bring some big-time players on board. As I talked about earlier, I think we've got much better and more comprehensive scouting than we had before, which hopefully will at least ensure that we know the quality of the players who are available to us, and then get a little boost in actually signing those players in the areas where we are a little better in scouting, according to the online manual. That is one thing that can work in your favor. Now, my hunch is that most of the college hockey programs that we're going to be competing with are going to be just as strong as not, if not stronger than us in most of these locales. So not sure how much of a bump we're going to get, but we'll do what we can to try to make this team as competitive as possible as soon as possible. And you can see it was a pretty rough season in the preseason for the Crusaders, shut out by Wisconsin, and then lost to Clarkson, Notre Dame, and Air Force, only scoring 1 goal in each of those games. I guess the positive is that our goaltending progressively got better in each of those games, at least in terms of the number of goals we allowed. And the other positive thing is that going forward, we're going to be playing a lot more games against Atlantic hockey opponents than some of those guys we faced off against in the preseason, who were from much more prominent hockey conferences and in some cases pretty prominent hockey programs. And again, very similar to FHM when you're playing with an NHL franchise. Find out our top jersey sales for September, led off by our newly minted captain, Nick Hale, and also get a training camp development report. Generally positive development by, I think, everyone who we have some numbers on. I don't think that's anything exceptional. We're dealing with 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old players who are at the stage in their development where they should be getting better on an almost daily basis. So positive that we had good development, but I don't think that was shocking. I'm guessing most college hockey programs probably experienced something similar. Turning to our monthly budget. If you've played FHM before, although I think this was new last year, may have been a season earlier, but I think the new financial system, if I remember correctly, came out in FHM 8. There's kind of a point system instead of a money system, although money does ultimately, profitability feed into the number of points that you get. We do want to invest a little more in scouting. We want to make sure that we're not hurting team morale. And we want to at least get a normal number of people in watching our team. So we're going to invest a little bit more. Actually, I'm going to crank up scouting a little more, particularly with the National Signing Day coming up in November. Want to hopefully make sure that we know as much as possible about the players that are going to potentially be making a real commitment to us and hopefully joining us for next season. So a little bit more of an investment in scouting, and at least we're no longer penalized in terms of our investments in team morale and attendance. You can see it looks like we're going to use up about a point total this month, but we will know more about that exactly when we see how many people we're actually getting into the rink. And with that, we will call it an episode. It does look like our young potential star, Mac Oliphant, lacerated chin out only day to day, so that's not a big issue, hopefully. Taking a look at the schedule, we've got almost a week until our first game kicks off against North Dakota. So should be plenty of time for him to heal from that day-to-day lacerated injury. So in our next episode, we are going to actually kick off the regular season with these Holy Cross Crusaders, see if we can get the team off to a solid start. And then probably most interestingly, we're going to play through National Signing Day and see of this list of unsigned prospects, Can we turn the biggest time prospects, Jenkins, McFadden, Foley, and Troutwine, into Crusaders for the 2023 to 24 season? We'll see if we can get those 4 guys to join us for next year, and maybe we'll be able to add a couple other interesting players along the way when we do get to the National Signing Day. So we're going to drop the puck on the new season in our next episode and try to sign some players to help us in the future. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.